Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Fisher Derderian, and I am the Executive Director of the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation. I'm pleased you all could join us today for another event in our interview series, Building Beautiful, led by the ever apt and wise Samuel Hughes. We have a real special treat for you today, as we've been going around now the world, starting in the United Kingdom, then to the United States, and last month into Guatemala with the Guatemalan architects Maria Sanchez and Pedro Godoy. We are now going to Thailand for a very different experience, but one I am very much so looking forward to. That being said, I'll leave the rest up to Samuel. Samuel Hughes is the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation's Senior Fellow in the Built Environment. He is a research fellow at the University of Oxford and a senior fellow at Policy Exchange, a think tank in the United Kingdom. So with that, Samuel, I will pass it over to you and let you take it from here. Oh, it seems you're muted, Samuel. Sorry.
Thank you. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Lovely. Yes, it's well. Thank you very much, Fisher. And traditions, including Italian Renaissance, the Thai tradition, original work in traditional architecture and urbanism. So it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome him to this series. Ong-ard, we usually start with.
Got my first hotel project in Chiang Mai, which is north of Bangkok. I felt that I really have to respect context. It's no contract for me to do anything. And that's what everybody did. But anyway, when I got to Chiang Mai, I visited the site. It's right in the old town, Chiang Mai Old Town, which is the best. I was really impressed. So I went around and looked at what's being built in Chiang Mai and look at all the temples within the Chiang Mai area. And there must have been at least 20 or 30 temples there. I've only found two temples that I like. One, I love the proportion of the colonnade, and the other one is it's actually a small temple, not a main building, but I like the proportion. So I kind of use that decision to design. So this is the first time I really do vernacular thing, building.
So this was about 30 years into your career as an architect, right?
Right. And
right, I see.
It took me so long. I'm not very bright. It took me that long to realize that the so-called modern architecture is a dead-end thing. I was doing a high-rise that's very similar to Michael Graves' building in Portland.
To Michael Graves' building in Portland?
Yeah. Actually, the client came to me. I don't know how he got hold of the blueprint of Michael Graves' building. It just happened I like it too, so we actually built that. Actually, of course, now I don't tell him that I designed that. I did a lot of things, but in Chiang Mai, this is the first hotel, and it's very tight budget, and it was during the Asian economic crisis too.
Right. Cool.
So I was able to usually find a contractor because nobody has work. I mean, construction stopped, and like I said, it's a very tight budget. So I went and looked around. I found this place that sells the old doors and windows, different Burmese houses. So I think they started to lay out our design. Then I realized that I got the scales all wrong. So I told him to stop. And luckily, I came across the Ong-ard architecture of Nepal. So because it's a very small site and for a room hotel, so I thought, gee, this is perfect. So I asked the contractor to stop work for a week. I went to Nepal. Luckily, the client's okay. I said, what I designed is not going to work. I need time out. So I went to Nepal for a week and came back and start a brand new concept.
You must have had a very flexible client.
Actually, my clients are all flexible because otherwise I cannot work with them.
Uh-huh.
They can't put a time frame on me. I can work. Yeah. That's probably explain why I don't have to make job. Because kind of difficult person to work with. Anyway, so I learn a lot from how you can create a close space that's alive and has beautiful proportion. I really enjoyed that 1 week in Nepal. I spent every day going out to the three cities, Kathmandu and Batam, and at night I went to search for books and stuff. It was a learning experience.
So why was it Nepal that had such an important effect? Has Nepal got
at that time, because I had to do this building, this complex of 40-room hotel on a very tight site. And my first scheme was trying to create a courtyard. And the first scheme was too, I suppose, simplistic or something.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't look right. Scales are wrong. So when I was in Nepal, I realized that you can do a small courtyard, but you got to have a release valve to get to a bigger, because outdoor space, stuff like that. What I'm saying is that so that's and while I was doing that hotel, I started another hotel, Western Car, which is my own hotel. This is the best when you're your own client, you know.
You find yourself to be a very flexible client.
But it took me 3.5 years.
Right, I see.
To design and build it. Because sometimes when I was actually designing and building at the same time, I got the concept, my precision for the main hotel complex is from actually all Chinese vernacular dwellings. But that's a side plan. But the building itself is kind of Northern style. Because I built in Chiang Mai, so I thought that's really odd. So I think that's the correct way I start building that. But at that time, when I started building, I had no idea what the rest of the area would be like. I was designing as we do. And again, on this Russian car project, it took about a month off because I ran out of ideas. I guess I went to the States for vacation, and I didn't have other work, so I can do that.
Uh-huh.
I have no clients other than myself. For some reason, after I came back, I was able to finish the project, the Russian car. Because the hotel complex is, like I said, Chinese vernacular dwellings. And the other part is the library and the suites. Those are more colonial. but I connected them with, I used the axis of this idea of Chinese classical architecture, which is symmetry and hierarchy. I use that, and I think that's the Chinese classical idea. What was your question again? I forgot.
Asking about the why Nepal had such a decisive effect. But
because they can build very small building, small space, and also very low ceiling.
and that tradition
I don't know in the old days that Nepal people were short or what. I have no answer, but they don't have furniture, so they sit on the floor. So the windowsill was about 40 centimeters from the floor because they sit, and the height of the sill is where your elbow is. I learned that from my guide. Yeah.
So our audience. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our audience is mostly British and American, and I think people were very curious to know a bit about the context in Thailand. So, what is the situation for traditional design like in Thailand? How much interest is there? What do you face opposition or hostility in some contexts?
I don't think Thai people have respect. Maybe they don't have enough knowledge. I suppose both, but they don't respect the tradition. I myself, I don't have any knowledge of Thai architecture, but I somehow I don't really go for Thai architecture. I thought it's too much of decorative. But when I came to Chiang Mai, then I started studying, like, where's all this Thai architecture from? I think they're from China, but nobody mentioned that. And I think most Thai architects included, I think traditional architecture means you're backward, you're not with the time. So sad. Because if you really study Thai architecture, then you have to go and look, where does it come from? I think they're from like Yunnan, Southern China. And then as I study more and the Chinese, and I really fell in love with the site planning of the discipline of the Chinese architecture, which is where Thai architects are from. But for the Thai in general, I don't think there's any. I mean, like it's. I've heard comments about my building many times. People are saying that, "Oh, my work is so easy to do. You just there's no creativity. Oh yeah, there's no originality. This is a good thing. Probably most. But the point is, originality is not the point to me, because nobody is. I don't understand why you have to keep coming up with new ideas. Like me said, why is it every Monday you gotta have an idea? Why is it? Can you just learn from tradition and something that doesn't work, then you improve on it, or you disregard it and improve on it. You need to have you need to know history. Because I didn't know that when after I graduated. But a lot of people still think that they don't respect history.
So it's interesting you should say that that you're not interested in originality as an objective, because I mean I think one thing people noticed looking at your work is that in some respects it's highly original. So I wonder, Fisher, could you bring up the Kiat Nakin Bank image that we discussed earlier? But partly because although you're drawing on traditional sources, you're often drawing on quite a wide range of traditional sources. So the Thai tradition, but also Chinese architecture, as you've mentioned, and also I guess especially Italian Renaissance architecture in from the West. So a building like this, I mean, I don't know if has there ever been a building that looks like that before you built it a few years ago in Bangkok. And it leads me to wonder, you know, if you end up not pursuing originality, you may sometimes end up being more original than if you make it your objective.
That's a good point, actually. If we be conscious about originality, which doesn't really make sense. And in this case, I think every element here on this facade, I mean, you've seen it somewhere before. I just took elements from classical Chinese architecture, like the bracket, which I really like. I think it was a beautiful sculpture. And yeah, the proportion was, I guess deep down, it probably because I like the Gladius building. So subconsciously, because it's probably in there. But to me, when I look at this building, I think every part's in there. It's you've seen somewhere before. I kind of took it and arranged it so that it fits the program, basically. So it's well, you think it's original, that's fine. I have no problem with that.
You're not against producing original buildings, but it's an accidental byproduct of.
It's an accident.
Building.
Like you have a roof, like the upper part. You have to in the building the roof. I thought that's a typical hot and wet climate. Thailand, so it's appropriate to have a veranda. And the opening are 2-story high, so because that's I always think that's a good scale for the public building. And also the windows are high because I kind of like when you go into a church and then you have the cursor and then so you feel serene and peaceful because the light comes in but you don't see what's going on outside. And in Bangkok Chinatown you need that because the outside, the exterior is a mess. It's just so you don't want, once you enter, you don't want to see out. But then I have this, at the end, you have this tiny light well, so you have a light coming, so just like so.
I wanted to ask. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask a bit about the urbanistic context in Thailand. So, Fisher, could you bring up the image of the satellite image of central Bangkok? Right. So I was looking at this, I guess yesterday, and thinking, actually, this is nearly perfect urbanism, right? This is dense, street-based, highly interconnected, mixed use. If we compare it, Fisher, could you show us Cincinnati? Fish this out from Google Street. I mean, pretty much every respect, Bangkok, at least from a satellite view, it looks a lot better than Cincinnati. And you go down, third image, Fisher, on the street view, go down to Street View, right? This isn't great architecture, obviously, or unremarkable architecture, but actually that street looks like, I mean, it's a place I would like to be. It's quite a nice
Right.
scale. It's very active facades, very clear, defined street lines, strong sense of enclosure, and there's the pot plants give a pleasing bit of greenery too. So, I mean, obviously, I especially want to be there at the moment because I've been stuck in one house in North London for the last 14 months. But even if that weren't the case, I would like to be there. So I'm wondering, do you actually have quite a good urban fabric to work with in Thailand? One of the themes that's come up a lot with, especially with American architects on this series, is it's they've got to find a way of getting traditional buildings into non-traditional urban settings, or trying to sort of rebuild a better traditional urban fabric. What's the experience of that like in Thailand?
I think the satellite of Bangkok, the inner city part, the oval thing, that's that thing. There's a big river on the right, and then there's a canal, which is a very tiny canal. Can you see the canal within that area? Actually, it used to be very nice when I was a kid because the buildings are lined with street and it's very orderly. And then it has a colonnade, which is beautiful. But today, actually, I was there about a month ago because client's going to do a hotel within the inner city, but all the colonnade being blocked and become part of the interior. And it's really not friendly at all. And too many cars also. I think cars really kills it. But the city are in the process of making Bangkok look like Cincinnati at the moment. They're building spaghetti, the highway everywhere, and actually they're really building more and more because of the traffic. Because we don't have enough road, which actually what they should have done is, of course I know they can't afford it, to build more roads because our roads are too far apart. Like one road to the next is like 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers away. If they built more roads, then there will be more pedestrian friendly. But they can't do that, so they have to build on the existing road, so it becomes a highway in the city. Then when that doesn't work, they build another layer of highways. It's really quite something.
So it's a strange situation where European cities or American cities are now, after 70 years of moving in that direction, are now trying to go back to having a less car-dominated city that has an urban fabric a bit more like Bangkok. But in Bangkok, they're making exactly the same mistakes as we made in the 1950s and 60s.
That's correct. Yeah, and it's called progress.
Right. Same tired ideas as well.
It's pathetic, isn't it? Yeah. But because cars the priority is automobile, not pedestrian. In the old center, Bangkok center, as I was walking, I noticed that since they blocked away the arcade, so you have to walk on the street with the car. So you actually with the cars, it's quite dangerous and it's quite unfriendly to people. With the colonnade, it's so nice, so you away from the sun because it's so hot, and then when it rains, it's okay. But now it's all gone. Everybody uses a part the interior spirit.
Fisher is sending me.
So it's not good as when you're looking at the
Fisher is just sending me reproachful direct messages saying that I have, as usual, failed to tell everyone that you can ask questions in the Q&A bar, which we'll then discuss in a little while when we get to that stage. So please do, and as usual, no question is too crazy or too offensive. Or I think we'd be curious to know a bit about, so you've, I think for the first time recently, you've been designing a whole neighborhood, one Nimman.
Yeah.
Fisher, maybe you could bring up the image of one Nimman that we were looking at earlier. Could you tell us a bit about how you've responded to some of these urbanistic challenges at one Nimman, and if your work there, if there's anything different in your approach to the kind of approach that new urbanists have taken in America or in Europe?
This is interesting because the client came to me with the plan already for the whole complex, and he wants me to do a corner building, which is on the left. And so I told him that this is not going to work. For me to do one building and I have to accommodate the site plan that he showed me that a big architectural firm designed. I said, I won't do it. If you want me to do it, I have to do the whole thing. So he disappeared. He disappeared for about 2 months. That's it.
You're a tough man to employ by the sound of things.
I mean, the plan, the site plan that he showed me was so simplistic, and it's very typical that you next to the street you have this parking, then the buildings are set back, and there's a so-called I can't explain it. It's really. So I said I can't do a building with that site plan. I will not do it. For some reason, after about 2 months, he came back. He said, "Okay." So I said, "Let's do this. I'll do also a site plan." And if you like it, then we go on. If you don't like it, then we stop there. Because if you have me do it, then it has to be my idea. I mean, he can't intervene. A lot of people are criticizing me for that. I said, "Well, it's his money. Why can't he, intervene?" But anyway, so I show him my design with a little model, and he loves it. So we start the construction quite soon, actually. But he's a very good client. He okayed that I, put all this arcade on every building, so he has less space to sell and to rent. But he okayed it. But then after the construction he started to change things, without telling me. But so I told him that I think if he's going to do that, I cannot work with him. And
you're very strict with your clients.
No, I mean, I just don't agree with his idea. No, eventually we parted, but the buildings were built according to my design, the exterior, but then all the interior circulation and all the content, building content. Oh yeah, I told that I have to participate with the building content too, because he wants to put the tax-free shop and stuff, which is I don't agree, and that's why I have to withdraw from the project. But the exterior was built pretty much according to my design, but a lot of details are wrong.
The interiors are all wrong.
And even exterior with some proportion of the columns and stuff. And we have in this one, you notice I align the building with the straight line but vary the height, the building height. So it looks like it's built by different people during a long period of time. And this is the first time I think that there is a public square, as far as I know, that there's none in Thailand. And I put a market hall, which is a wooden structure, which has a friendly scale. But again, that I don't think we have a picture of that.
Fisher, if you were able to bring up another.
Is there a market hall? Do you have a market hall? No, that's Macau Hotel. That's not it. This is tenant. No, I guess you don't. That's okay. Anyway, that market hall is something that I've seen in a magazine probably 30, 40 years ago in southern France, in southwest France. I just love it, and I felt that it could be anywhere. So I actually sort of rebuilt that and put it in the public open space. So it's something that's intimate and it's built of wood, so it belongs to it easily belongs to Nimman. Actually, when I did this project and when I had the idea that I'm going to build that market hall, I actually went to visit the place. I think a town called Montpellier in southwest France. I tend to do that when but I've seen it like 30 years ago, like I said. Then, so I just went there to look at the building, the actual market hall, and did some measurement. So it's pretty much.
One of the themes we've discussed a lot on this series is whether there's a way that traditional design can break into the mainstream. So it's often, I mean, I think in every country where it is going on at the moment, it started mostly in the private residential market with large private houses, and in some places it's now starting to enter less recherché, less more mainstream contexts. And what are your thoughts on whether this could happen in Thailand or how this could happen in Thailand? Can the kind of thing you've been doing at One Nimman, could that be used by other property developers in some form in a much wider range of housing developments?
I kind of think it's there are many people that really do like One Nimman, and especially tourists, they would come and take pictures, but that's the fashionable thing. But the local architects and I think they don't understand what I was trying to do. They said my building the scale is big.
Your building is what? Sorry?
The scale is big, whatever that means. I thought that the scale of most buildings on Nimman is the name of the road. On that road, it's the wrong scale for a public building. So I'm doing it as a example. This is the correct scale. And they're saying that my buildings are too big, too tall, and I think, well, a lot of people like the place, but a lot lot of architects, they don't think so. But as you know, it's an L-shaped thing, and with the piazza inside the public square inside. But I think that we need to build. It's too small. We need to build another side of the street with the same scale. Then, if we could eliminate cars and motorbike on this road and make it a pedestrian street, then it would be much more to my.
So you'd say, I mean, it's difficult to get really good urbanism in very small developments because you can't stop them from being car dependent when you're only developing a very small part of a town.
Right.
What you need is to be able to do a traditional development on a larger scale when you could create a whole town that was not based on cars anymore and could have that kind of pedestrian friendly. Right.
I need to. Actually, I did tell the client before I withdrew that we really need to build more to have the effect that I want. To have this friendly neighborhood atmosphere. Because he owned the land on the opposite side of this one Nimman thing.
He also owns land on the opposite side of the street.
Yes, but the thing is, I told him that I think he should tear that down.
Right.
So because it's the wrong scale, you know. I guess he didn't want to tear it down. I can understand that because it was recently built, so it's just finished by another architect. But it's just not.
Even with your strict standards for your clients, you didn't absolutely insist that he tear down the neighboring block before you agree to work with him.
I did not, but I mentioned to him when the construction of it started. I said, you know, we really need to tear down.
Well, sometimes, I mean, a good example can be very powerful. We were speaking, so the last interview we had here was with Maria Sanchez and Pedro Godoy in Guatemala. And I know they mentioned they've been told by the mayor of Guatemala City that he now regards their development as a model for future housing development in the city. So maybe you need to talk to politicians rather than talking to architects. They might be easier to convince.
Not politician here in China. I've mentioned that to a close friend of mine. He's an architect too, and this is his word, not mine. These people are idiots. You know. It's his word. He said that just do what you can, you know. And I think he's right. But the mentality, the politician here. They become a politician not because they want to improve the city. It's because it's for their own benefit.
Are there other traditional architects in Thailand, or are you the only one?
As far as I know, I'm the only one because
right. Wow.
I'm the one who's stupid enough to do traditional to them.
Takes a very.
I'm not with the time.
Takes a very stubborn personality to be the only one.
I suppose they would think, okay, they understand me because you know I'm an old guy, so it's okay to be backward. I guess. This young and upcoming architects, they have to be. I guess they have to come up with new ideas. They have to be original.
I wanted to ask about religious architecture in Thailand. So,
yes.
I understand traditionally it was governed by very strict rules, but I notice. So I don't think you've done any work on temples so far. I'm wondering what do temples look like in contemporary Thailand? Which architects are doing those?
When they build new temples, there are architects who are, I think they call expert on Thai architecture. But again, I think to me, you always have to have a good master plan, and temples are never, all the temples that I've seen, you don't have a good master plan. And even the new ones, they're just built according to the old temple, which I think there are many faults that should be correct.
So there is a kind of traditional building sector
Architects.
Works on for temple architecture.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're expert on doing wood carvings and things, but the essence of it, they don't get into that. To me. So, as for me, I don't think anybody would ask me to do one. But actually, I would like to do a temple.
Very interesting. Right.
I would like to do one, but again, I think I would have to do my own temple. Nobody would hire me. No, like in Japan, like I really like. I love to visit Kyoto and to go into a temple because you feel so peaceful. You visit, and the buildings are so disciplined, and I wanted to Thai temple to be like that, to be disciplined.
And traditional temples were disciplined in that way, right?
Discipline in the planning, and also in I think there should be less decorative thing on the Thai temple, and more emphasis should be put on the planning.
So you think Thai temples, so as I understand, Thai temples today, so they are still traditional in style, but they're done, you think, with an overwhelming focus on just the reproduction of historical details, rather than understanding the deeper essence of a traditional temple plan and thinking through.
They don't do traditional detail. They do traditional detail, then add some more.
Right, I see.
More junk. And then, and then they thought more is more. I talked to the monk here in Chiang Mai. I thought maybe I can do something. Then realized that I can't talk with him because we talk in different languages. He is more into more building a temple. And I was telling him about, temples should be more ordered so that when people come, they should be, they should feel like peaceful, and which is, I thought, is an obvious thing for a temple when you go in there to from the chaos of the city. But anyway, the monks really, they actually, in Chiang Mai at least, they actually compete with another temple.
Competing with
I noticed they compete with, like if this temple built a new gate, there's so many temples in Chiang Mai. The one next door started building a new gate.
So they're competing for people to come to them, or
they compete. If this temple built a gate with this complexity of ornament, the one next door would be more complex.
Right, I see.
So and not put another. It's uglier.
So in the past, Thai architecture was governed by quite strict rules about the kinds of details that could go on different buildings. Is that right? I thought some kinds of
Suppose-
colors were restricted
supposedly-
to oil building.
Yeah,
Some materials
supposedly
were
today, too, supposedly.
supposedly still today.
Supposedly, because there's a ministry that's supposed to govern this.
It's a ministry that is supposed to achieve this, but it doesn't happen in practice, or
It does not. You know, I in my building at Russian Car, I found a temple library in a town next to Chiang It's a beautiful, very massive form of a building there. So I actually took the carpenter and with the plywood and made a contour, you know, because it's very difficult to get it right. I think it's beautiful. It was done by local craftsmen, maybe. And I put that on my building in my hotel. And then about 10 or more years ago, the I don't know what's the name of the ministry that's supposed to go and when
ministry that
went
regulates.
down. Yeah, not renovate. What's the word?
I have no
Anyway,
idea. The ministry for
they repaired the building. But then that race that I like so much, it's different now. It's not like that. It doesn't look good anymore because if I've seen what they did back then, I would not have reproduced it in my building. So actually, they actually destroyed it. So I told everybody that I know that if you want to see the real temple, you have to come to my hotel.
right.
That's I don't know.
Oh.
To me, it's a beautiful form. It's very massive, very strong.
Is there traditional vernacular design that continues in the countryside in Thailand?
Not really.
Right.
Because this mentality of if you do a traditional building, that means you're not wealthy.
That means you're not wealthy.
Mm.
I see. So people feel
Like if your house built of wood, which is teak, then if your house is built with cement, not lime, but cement, then that means you're more well off.
So building of cement is a symbol in rural areas.
And when I that's how I got to buy this old house cheap 20 years ago when I just moved to Chiang Mai, because they had to sell this beautiful cheap weather by rain and sun. They're happy to sell it.
Selling exquisite pieces of traditional craft that you were just able to buy up for
quite cheap, and then they built a cement house. They built a cement house, so everybody around them.
Right.
It's unreal to you, I think. But this is
it's another case where you think I mean, now in Europe and America, everyone's going back. Wood is a material everyone's fascinated with, and people are even interested in building high-rise out of like cross-laminated timber and this kind of, just because people are so mesmerized by wood and its aesthetics. And cement is obviously a low-status material that everyone tries to conceal at all costs. So it's a sad irony to see that the same mistakes are being replicated.
Mm. But I suppose, maybe in 50 years' time, maybe they'll come to realize that, I think we have to build in wood. I don't know. I hope so.
You have to preserve as much of it as possible in the meantime.
Yes, and I always tell my client, we do a hotel, that is at home to if you come across, and even if you're done, just look for wood, old woods, and I would want to use that. It's a much better, much more beautiful than new.
wood was the traditional material for nearly all kinds of building in Thailand. Is that right?
Right. And it wasn't expensive then, but since we keep cutting but not growing them, so now we don't have, and becomes so very expensive. Teak is the best. It's not too hard. It has a beautiful grain, beautiful color.
Are there ways in which your views about, so you've told us obviously that you shifted from working in contemporary styles to working in traditional styles in the late 1990s. I'm wondering if there have been further shifts in your work since then. So have your views about traditional design, or has your practice of traditional design evolved over the last 20 years? And are there things now that you did in the year 2000 that you wouldn't do today?
Since I was able to change and become a traditionalist and sometimes classical architecture, I think my buildings are okay, but before that my buildings are not very good. The reason it's okay is because everything that I did was borrowed from tradition. That's why it's still okay. But I think if I can only design building like what's been shown in Bernard Rudowsky book, the book called Architecture with Architects. If I can only do building like that, then I'll be very happy.
Andrew Robsky.
When?
The author is Andrew Robsky.
Bernard Rudowsky.
Bernard Rudowsky. Okay, so that's your aspiration now.
It has been a long time, because I think architects cannot design buildings. I think craftsmen can do it. Architects, maybe you have too much ego or something. Craftsmen is a very good designer. So I want to, if I can do buildings like that book, it looks like it's natural to be there, you see all those buildings that he accumulated that book.
So your aspiration is to overcome your ego as an architect and become more like a craftsman who produces things that seem completely natural.
I would be very glad if but it's not easy. You have to get, but I since I moved to Chiang Mai, I decided I would never think again. Search for how when there's a problem, I would search how did people solve this problem. When I find a solution that I like back in time, then I would use that. But I stopped using. I stopped to think, kind of, and search for solution, because everything has been done before, which is so very true.
Everything has been done before, but you just have to find the solution for the particular case.
Look for it. I suppose. And if you take that approach, I think it's more peaceful. You have no pressure. You don't have to think about being original.
Well,
it's better that way.
Ong-ard, this has been absolutely fascinating, and sure we could continue indefinitely, but Fisher is alerting me that my hour is up, so I'm going to have to draw things to a close. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope we can speak again soon.
Oh, thank you, and I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you.
Our great pleasure.
Well, thank you, Ong-ard, and thank you again for joining us. I know it's quite late your time, so I'm very grateful that we could get you involved. And Samuel, wonderful job. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion, the sixth discussion of Building Beautiful.